really don't know what I'm doing with my life some days, and you probably don't know what you're doing with your life some days, and that's normal. So we need to stop putting so much pressure on ourselves to have it all figured out. Redefining self-development through the lens of a first-gen Latina. Welcome to Tell Me Más. Hi everyone, welcome back to Tell Me Más. It's been a minute. I wasn't able to put out an episode last week, but here we are again. I'm so excited to be here. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about kind of trusting that journey and path that we're on, how hard it is not to compare ourselves to others, especially when we feel like we're so behind in life. So we're just gonna have a little chat about that and be in this moment together. Before we get into it, thank you so much for being here today and taking the time to listen to the podcast. So remember, wherever you're listening, to follow on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Is that what you do on there? I'm a Spotify gal, so I'm not sure. And if you're watching on YouTube, let me know how you like the new setup. It's up and coming. I share this space with my boyfriend who's a streamer, so I have to kind of make some switcheroos when I use the space, but let me know how you like it on YouTube, and subscribe on YouTube, where I'll be putting out the video podcast version on there, in addition to hopefully once I get some new camera stuff going on, to share some more vlogs and other shorter form content on there that I kind of relates to wellness and mindset and just being Latinas. So again, thank you so much, and let's get into it. So if you've ever felt behind in life, know that you are not alone. Literally, probably once a week, I feel like I'm not doing much in my life and that I need to do better, but that just might be because I am an overachiever, and being in your mid-20s, mid to late 20s, honestly, any age, you always feel like you're behind. Especially when you are getting into your 20s, mid-20s, late 20s, people are starting to get married, people are getting degrees, people are getting doctorate degrees, people are doing stuff with their careers, having kids, buying houses, that it just feels like, what am I doing with my life? I'm just sitting here with my dogs watching anime and starting on a podcast. And so I can't just help but to feel behind in life, especially with all these societal pressures that we face, not only just as Americans, but also as Latinas. We have an added layer on there when our familia asks us, ¿cuándo te vas a casar? ¿Cuándo vas a tener hijos? This and this and this and that. And it's exhausting. So if you're feeling like you're behind in life, you're not, and I constantly have to remind myself of that, because or else I'll go into a deep hole of feeling like I am a loser. But just remind yourself that you really aren't behind in life. We are all on different paths, and really just goes into being grateful for what you have achieved, what you have overcome, etc., etc. But we will get into that. But just know that you are not behind. You are where you are meant to be. And I'm going to explain why that is. And I feel like this constant comparison of feeling behind in life doesn't help when it comes to social media. Oh, social media. How I have a love-hate relationship with it, because there are times where I just feel like I see all these people achieving these amazing things, and I'm like, ugh, why am I not as successful as I am like them? But more often than not, they've either have had an advantage, or they're on their day 50 where I'm on my day 3, and it's not fair to compare yourself to someone else's journey, because again, we don't know what they're going through, we don't know what they have gone through, and again, social media is a highlight reel. And I think this all starts at such a young age, where we feel this insane pressure to meet societal expectations. And especially as first-gen Latinas, there's so much more to it. So ever since I was a little girl, I was ingrained with this idea that tengo que graduarme para seguir adelante, and I have to make more money, and I have to go to college get a degree, be successful, in order to not end up like how my family says where they are at, to have a better life. And that's a lot of pressure, especially since they kind of also sometimes hint at that you're going to be the way out. You're going to be the one that is going to make a lot of money and be super successful and get the whole family out of poverty. And maybe they don't expect you to do all of that, but more oftentimes than not, they kind of spin this narrative that it kind of is up to you. And you kind of have to be the one to get the momentum started, especially if you're an older sibling, a firstborn Latina or Latino, and it can get extremely overwhelming super quickly. So from a young age, I knew right away that I was not going to get pregnant at a young age. I was going to go to college and get a degree. And after that, I was going to get an amazing and fantastic job that's going to make me a lot of money. And then finally buy a house and be able to pay for my family's expenses and whatnot. And that did not happen. And when you start off with such a huge expectation at such a young age, I feel like it set me up for a lot of overextending of myself that ultimately led to feeling like I let people down, I let myself down, I let my family down, and feeling like I didn't do what I wanted with my life. That's a lot to take in, especially when you're the first one to graduate from college. You're the first one navigating the education system here as a first-generation immigrant in the United States. You're constantly having to go through all these hoops and barriers, and even just talking about it right now, it's so exhausting. I feel like I set myself up for failure in a way because I was being so over expecting of myself, and it's not a good feeling. Additionally, we're painted this dream that if we go to college, we'll get a good job and make a lot of money. But not only is that dream painted to us, the students, it's painted to a lot of our families who don't understand how the education system works in the first place. So when you do graduate from college with a good degree and still can't get a good job and still can't make a lot of money, they don't understand. They're like, why don't you have a good job yet? Or ¿por qué no aplicaste aquí? Or ¿para qué fuiste a la escuela? And it leads to this whole frustration. And I had to one day explain to my family, like, it doesn't work that way. And I had to find out the hard way, and they had to find out the hard way from me, because they were expecting so much from me, not because they wanted to take advantage of me, but because they wanted to see me succeed, and to ultimately tell them, like, no, that's not how it works, actually, that a degree doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to get a good job. It was almost like this dream that we shared collectively just kind of vanished. And it makes me sad and that's a whole nother, conversation, and talking about the US education system and finding a job and being a first gen and navigating that's a whole nother episode. That's just so much pressure to put on yourself at such a young age. It ultimately led to me having this breakdown during the pandemic, because I felt like I went to college para nada, de nada me estresé, and worked my butt off for nothing, and it's disappointing. It's hard not to compare yourself to others when you had this big dream and you didn't get to the place that you thought you'd get at or get to, and they're at, and you're like, what the hell? Why isn't it working for me? I ultimately realized that that's just not my journey. Or after having navigated so many different types of jobs, and I tell you, I worked at a home for people with autism. I worked at a daycare, I worked at a school, I worked in a corporate setting, and I just felt like none of it was for me. And I just so frustrated. I tried everything. I was like, I don't know why none of these careers speak to me. And maybe it's because maybe some of you relate to this, where a job to you is more than just the money. You kind of want to have an experience out of it. And if you just want a job for the money and can tolerate it, that's amazing. And that's another way to live a great life. But that just wasn't what was resonating for me. And then that's how I ended up in this whole becoming an entrepreneur thing, really owning into that and taking on that journey. And again, I feel like I was comparing my day one of being an entrepreneur to someone's day 30 and feeling like I'll never get to where they're at. And if I were to tell myself 2 years ago that I actually am making a little bit of money with my business, I would be kind of like mind blown, because at that time I felt like I was not going to make it. So that's just a quick story about how I felt that I had to meet so many expectations from my family and being a first-gen Latina and having all this on my shoulders to really make it out and be successful, and trying not to compare myself to others. It's just such a mind kabobble of thoughts. And it's crazy to think that a lot of us feel like that because we aren't using our degrees or don't have a good job because of our degrees, we kind of think of it as a failure instead of as an accomplishment. Because going to college and taking all those hard classes and going through that journey, that's hard, especially as a first gen. We're the first people to navigate that territory. We have to ask those questions. We have to kind of make it out. And yet, after completing this and not getting to our final destination, so to say, we feel like it was just a big failure, when oftentimes we have to kind of reframe our mind and be like, no, I went through all of that. I figured it out. I was able to graduate from college, the first one in my family to graduate from college at that. And that's a great accomplishment. So if you're kind of in the same boat as I am, where you're not really using your degree, it's still an accomplishment. And your younger self would be so proud of you, especially if that was a goal that you had for such a long time. Some of you may relate to this, but I was the oldest in my family. So on top of, trying to navigate this whole education system here, I also, had to take care of my younger brother and sometimes my cousin and help them with their homework and translate for my family. And on top of, school and being a kid and a teenager and trying to figure out life, I also had to, help my family with things. And that was my normal. And that maybe was your normal too. I didn't think twice about it. Looking back at it now, that was a lot for a young kid to take a hold of. And sometimes a lot of us didn't have anyone to talk to about how difficult that was. It was just our daily life. After school, my grandpa would come up to me and ask, oh, can you translate this? And it would be some random bank document, and I would translate as best as I could, maybe with the help of Google. It was a time, and I still translate for them to this day, but having to do that from such a young age is just another familial pressure that a lot of first gens feel. Not only, meeting the expectations of society by going to college and all that good stuff, you have to meet your family's expectations by helping around the house, helping your siblings, helping translate, helping them go to certain meetings and translate for them there. I had to go to so many doctor's appointments with my grandpa and grandma because, my mom was working, so I had to go with them and translate. And, maybe I was 12 years old trying to figure out what medical terms were. And luckily, there was usually a translator there, but, you still had to check in your family member, or sometimes there wouldn't be a translator there. And so, yeah, that was just my daily life growing up. I didn't think twice about it. And yeah, it's a lot of pressure to have on your shoulders. So if you relate to any of that, I see you, I feel you, you are seen. And that really impacted my journey and my path. And I oftentimes have to remind myself that all of that stuff that I was doing made me who I am today, impacted my own personal path. And that's why you shouldn't compare yourself to others, because maybe that person who you're comparing yourself to, they didn't have to go through all that shit. And just because they didn't have to go through that shit and you had to, that doesn't mean that you're not going to reach that goal or that point in life that they're at right now. They just had the privilege of not having to go through all those hoops and were able to focus on what they were doing and it got them there faster. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to get there. It just means it's going to take a little bit longer, and you have a little bit more experience in life. So maybe they're more nervous to make doctor's appointments, but to you it comes like it's nothing because you had all that experience of helping your family. So it's something I didn't think of till this day. And really appreciating that, as hard as it was to do all of that, I still learned a lot from it, and it gave me a lot of advantages. Sometimes more disadvantages than advantages, but they are still advantages. So it's just recognizing what they are and being grateful for it. So, and aside from being first gen and being Latina, I think a lot of us feel like we don't know what we're doing with our life. And there's always like this meme or video or reel, TikTok, whatever you want to call it, making fun of that. You're like in your 30s and you still don't know what you're doing with your life. Even, looking up to our parents and thinking that they had it all together. But in reality, they probably didn't, and they were just figuring it out day by day, and that's normal. None of us have it figured out. Sometimes I feel like I want to go back to school and get my master's. Sometimes I feel like I want to go move to a different state. Sometimes I feel like I don't want to do this whole business thing anymore, and I really don't know what I'm doing with my life some days, and you probably don't know what you're doing with your life some days, and that's normal. So we need to stop putting so much pressure on ourselves to have it all figured out. And I wish that from a young age we were told that we are not supposed to have it all figured out. That's probably what I'm going to tell my kids if I ever have kids, that you don't need to have it all figured out, because growing up, that's what I felt like I needed to do. Especially I'm going to bring back the first gen thing and being the oldest daughter thing, that I felt like I had to have it all figured out. I was the one in my family that everyone went to for questions. I was expected to have answers. It was, ¿para qué fuiste a la escuela? There was always this expectation to have it all figured out because you were the one that was going to school. You were the one that was having these experiences in the education system that your family didn't have. And so I'm just here to tell you, you don't have to have it all figured out. That is totally okay. And I wish I could tell my 15-year-old self that it's okay to not know everything. So take it from me, I don't know what I'm doing, and that's okay. Oh, and for those that are watching the video, I like to use Play-Doh when I'm talking. I just feel like it helps process my ideas more. And something my therapist recommended, because I deal with some skin picking. So whenever I talk, I feel like I have to have something in my hands. So I'm trying out Play-Doh, and it actually does really, really help to just have something in my hands. I was definitely the kid in school growing up that felt like I had to doodle while I was taking notes or in class, and I would get in trouble for it. But I promise you I was paying attention. I just felt like I needed to do something while I was learning. Screw that teacher that said I couldn't learn and doodle at the same time, because I was definitely learning and I passed that test. So, but yeah, if you have the same issue, definitely recommend Play-Doh. Super cheap, and I don't know, just brings back that those good childhood memories. So Play-Doh. But anyway, so all these societal expectations kind of lead to this danger of over comparing, and over comparing yourself is so bad. And as humans, it's only natural to compare yourself to others. It's a human instinct. It's how we survived, ages ago, is by comparing ourselves to others and learning from that. But it's just this constant comparison to others, especially with social media and the rise of TikTok. It's really, really hard not to compare yourself. And let me tell you how I tackle it. I really try not to interact with posts that bring about those feelings of comparison. So really think about who you're following and the type of contact you're interacting with. If that creator is making you feel some sort of way, kind of reflect on it. Is it because you're comparing yourself to them? Is the content that they regularly post, is that worth those feelings? And I seriously want you to ask yourself that, because most of the times it's not. And what I recommend doing is either, obviously unfollowing them, or I think sometimes you can hide their content without unfollowing them depending on the social platform. And there's even sometimes old friends from college or high school that I just, sometimes you just get this feeling of like inadequacy when you view their stuff. And that's not saying that I don't like them or anything. Their content just makes me, or the stuff they post just makes me feel some sort of way. And I don't like the way that it makes me feel. And I don't want to unfollow them because, they're still a friend or an acquaintance. So I just pause their stories and that feeling is gone. But, it's also important to really think about why the comparison might be coming up. And that's not to say you have to do it each time, but if it's a constant feeling with the same person, and after, pulling the trigger and pausing their stories or unfollowing them is when I suggest why did that make me feel that way? Why did I feel so inadequate compared to them? And that's where you kind of have to remind yourself, they're only posting what's good in their life. Nobody really posts the bad, so you don't really know what they're going through. And, being happy that they have these experiences, and just because they are having these experiences doesn't mean that you can't or won't ever have them in your life. They might just come at a later time, and sometimes you don't even care for what they're doing. Maybe they're just surfing and you don't even like the ocean, so why are you jealous, or why are you feeling you're not good enough? And then I think it's also dangerous when you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to become a healthier version of yourself, and you're seeing this person that lost a lot of weight, or they're posting a lot of, really nice selfies where they looked really posed and look bomb. And again, they're just posting the good ones. That doesn't mean, they don't have their bad days or that they don't feel inadequate themselves, because everyone has those days. And again, you might be comparing your day 1 to their day 500, especially if they've also struggled with how you're feeling. So again, take the time and see if you kind of just need to go through your following and unfollow some people, because you have to put yourself first. And that's sometimes I think we don't do that because we don't want to hurt other people's feelings, but this is important. So really take the time to think about how others' content is affecting you, and either unfollowing them, like I said, pausing their stories, or just don't interact with that content. It doesn't serve you. And then I challenge you to kind of shift your mindset from, not having enough, to thinking of, I have plenty, and recognizing, the individual strengths that you have, the stuff that you that you have accomplished, instead of constantly measuring yourself against others, and embrace your own unique journey. And I know that is easier said than done. There are days where I'm just like, what am I doing? Why am I on this path? And honestly, you don't really know until you kind of reach that milestone, and you kind of look back on the last few years, few days, few weeks, and you're like, oh, that's why I went through that, because I had to go through all of that to get here and feel the enjoyment and success that I'm feeling now. I had to go through all that BS to get to where I am at now. Unfortunately, you won't know why you went through or why you are going through what you're going through now until in the future. But when you get there, it'll all make sense. And I know it's easier said than done, but you really have to trust the journey, because honestly, that's what life is all about. None of us know what we're doing, so we just kind of have to trust the journey that we're on, trust this path, and trust that whatever we're working towards, or whatever life is moving us towards, is what is meant to be, and we won't know until we get there. And aside from recognizing all those accomplishments that you have done, also recognize stuff and all the barriers that you have moved past, because I bet that a lot of the shit that you went through was not easy and was very, very hard and took a lot of tears, a lot of strength to move past it. And that's something that you should be proud of. And that's something that not everyone's going to go through and understand. So that's something that you need to be proud of. All those battle wounds, all those battle scars, they are what make you who you are. And they are lessons that not everyone's going to learn, but for some reason you had to learn it. I kind of think of it this way. I'm a lot more empathetic towards people because of the shit that I went through. You have to recognize that what you've been through was hard and was also an accomplishment. And I think that's also something that keeps me from comparing myself to others, is they did not go through what I went through and I did not go through what they went through. Maybe we went through some similar things, but there are things where I've been more privileged or they've been more privileged that has helped them on their path. So you can't compare yourself to someone else's journey, because it's not the same, and some of us are going to have it a lot easier. But on the upside, I guess, kind of, as shitty as it sounds, going through all this crappy stuff is what makes you who you are, and hopefully, a kind and a more empathetic person at that. But maybe they're not a kind and empathetic person. Honestly, I value kindness a lot more than, having all this success, but that's just something else to think about. We have all these battle wounds, and they're not something you have to share by all means, but they should be something that you are proud of, because you overcame that shit, you did that shit, and you are here now because you went through and overcame all that BS to be the amazing, badass chingona that you are today. I can't say mija. I feel like I'm not old enough yet, but amiga, please know that you are amazing regardless of what you have gone through. Give yourself a big hug, because you went through all of that and you are still here and you are still fighting and you are still moving towards that goal every single day. And okay, so how do we move towards that, more accepting mindset, and how do we embrace this journey? And it does take time. Obviously, anything takes time, but it's having gratitude, being compassionate, not just towards others, but yourself, and just really accepting again, accepting where you are, accepting how things are, accepting that some things might not change, and also accepting that you do have the power to change a lot of things if you want to. And I think as cheesy as it sounds, it really does help to reflect and journal and think about these things. I don't think I'd be where I am at now if I didn't take the time to do that. And you can do that through journaling, watching videos with journaling prompts, just looking up prompts that help you foster that self-acceptance mindset. And I really like affirmations, whether you repeat them to yourself or write them down, whatever works. That's another way to kind of foster this self-acceptance mindset. And it's not an overnight thing. It's something you do have to work towards. I think combining this and my social media tips is really, really helpful, and finding content that helps you reflect on those things. And I'm always a big advocate of therapy. So if you have the ability to seek a therapist, please try it out. And that's a whole nother journey in itself. But once you find that therapist that meets your needs, I could not be more grateful for finding the therapist that I have, even though it took me a minute. But to summarize, clearing up that social media feed, watching content that feeds your soul and helps you reflect on your mindset, journaling, affirmations, etc. It doesn't have to be a whole routine you do every day, even if it's once a week, which is something that I'm striving towards, to kind of take the time to reflect once a week, is really, really helpful. And aside from all those things, is always finding a support network. And I know that I live in a suburb in Minnesota and it's hard for me to find people that I vibe with. So I've been finding a lot of people that I vibe with online. The TikTok comunidad, the Latina community, is so amazing on there. Y'all are the best, and I've felt very supportive from the Latino community on there, so definitely recommend social media for that. And, finding friends and other first gens, they don't have to be Latina, obviously, but kind of understand that struggle and that feeling like you're behind in life. That's why I'm so grateful. And during college, we had this program that helped first generation college students with resources, and I was a part of that group, and I met a lot of my college friends through that group because we all connected on facing these barriers of first gens and being the first to go to college and kind of going through that together. I could not be more grateful, and I wish that was a program in every single college, and honestly even in high school. I feel like we need that everywhere. That's just kind of reaffirming what I'm saying, that having that support network is so important. So really make an effort to find that, even if it's just one person, even if it's online, even if you just talk to them once a month. It's better than nothing, and it's so helpful. Oh, and if you are in college currently and you're listening to this, see if they do have that at your school, if they have some sort of first gen program, or see if they have any student groups that you can connect with people on there and share in the struggles. It's just, it helps to have someone to complain with, and sometimes that encouragement of others helps you fight for the changes needed. And I don't know, I feel like my college experience would not have been the same if I had not been a part of that group. It just made the school feel like it was a much more diverse school than it actually was, because after class, we'd all meet in a room and hang out, and we'd have weekly meetings and stuff like that. And it was such a diverse group of people, whereas like my regular college classes, I was like one of 5 people of color in the classroom, so it just made it feel a lot more welcoming. So I highly suggest seeing if there's something like that in your community or school. It really does make a difference. And before we end this podcast episode, I wanted to share some affirmations for accepting your path and accepting where you are now. So take the time to really listen to these affirmations. You can always come back to this podcast and play these every morning, play them on your way back to work. So what you're going to do is repeat after me, and I'm going to repeat the affirmation twice. So after I say it, you can say it either in your head or out loud, whatever you are comfortable with. And again, you can always come back to these. But let's get started. I am on my own unique journey. I am on my own unique journey. I celebrate my individuality. I celebrate my individuality. Estoy orgullosa de mis propios logros. Estoy orgullosa de mis propios logros. I am deserving of success and happiness. I am deserving of success and happiness. Me libero de la presión de compararme con los demás. Me libero de la presión de compararme con los demás. And amigas, just repeat those, every morning or whenever you feel like you need a little pick-me-up for self-acceptance. This podcast is always here for you. And I'll also post a shorter version on TikTok with just the affirmations, so you can also save the video on there as well. And that's the end of today's episode about trusting your own journey and embracing the journey and all the things, and to not compare yourself so much to others. I hope this was helpful, amigas. I know it's, again, easier said than done to trust the journey, to really believe in the journey, and to just tener confianza en lo que va a pasar. Pasa por algo. Things happen for a reason, and I am such a huge believer in that. And you won't know it today, but you might know tomorrow why some things happen. So, and just to summarize, we talked about, all the pressures that we face as first-gen Latinas, having to go through all the things like being the first to go to college, or having to navigate just the education system here, taking care of our siblings, and how that really affects embracing our path, not wanting to compare ourselves to others. And then we talked about the importance of shifting our mindset and embracing the journey through either self-acceptance, obviously self-acceptance, but journaling, taking the time off of social media, and really putting yourself in front of content and people by building a supportive network that will really uplift you and make you feel good about the path that you are on. Yeah, that was it, you guys. I hope that this was really, really helpful. This is something that I think about a lot, and we're humans, so this is all we have is just this journey and this path that we're on, and really believing in it and trusting in it and having faith that where life leads us is where we're meant to be, and that if we don't like it, we also have the power to change it. Don't feel like just because life is throwing you some way, it doesn't mean that you don't have the decision to make some shit happen. You have the power within yourself to make those choices, but sometimes shit happens for a reason, and it's also accepting that and believe that the path that you're on is amazing and that it will all make sense one day. You also have the power to make shit happen. So that's all I have for you today. But I just wanted to remind you before I let you go to follow the podcast on Spotify, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and follow me on TikTok and Instagram as Dinapreneur to get more content like this one where we talk about being first-gen Latina, wellness, mindset, being an entrepreneur, all the things, todas las cosas. And I'm going to leave you with this. You are amazing. You got this. I hope I've inspired you to take the day or to take the next day with a lot of power to really accept things as they are and to keep the momentum going. But eso es todo, amigas. Los vemos en la próxima. Or, yeah, that makes sense, right? Nos vemos. Adios. Bye.